Well, yeah, we could do a quick review, I guess, that way.
It's up to you.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's do that. So quick review, what is DevOps?
DevOps is the supply chain management of digital assets for the business, from the business all the way to the customer.
Perfect. How does DevOps relate to the cloud?
The cloud is just another distribution method for digital assets. So they're not related. However, people tend to relate them. I can have a DevOps practice. Facebook has a massive DevOps practice, and they own their own data centers.
And you use, at Marriott, you use Kubernetes to talk to different flavors of the cloud, right?
So we use it as an abstraction layer.
Okay.
So every cloud provider has different APIs on how you talk to them. So the way Amazon handles the network is in what they call like network interface is totally different than what Google calls handles their network or their network interface. And so what we're doing is we're basically saying that compute or a computer is a common denominator across all clouds. And then we use Kubernetes on top of that to abstract that so that you do no longer have vendor lock-in to a cloud provider. I have the same experience every time I hit, say, Azure or Google or AWS. If I'm using Kubernetes, I have the same exact experience with my application every time.
Okay. Dwayne, I also told the team how you recently became a Google Cloud Certified Fellow, and that you were among 20 elites in software architecture to come through this program and get this designation. So with that, I think our next question is, what are the advantages of using the Google Cloud platform versus the other cloud service providers such as AWS and Azure?
Sure. So from a usability standpoint, I would say that Google tends to skew towards the Linux system administrator. Most people who are consuming, say, AWS or Azure, they're still using a GUI to consume it. Google kind of encourages you to use command line. So from just a nerd standpoint, I think Google is much better. The other things that I think Google does very well is analytics, big data. If you're talking about like being all in on Kubernetes, I think Google is definitely better than AKS, or like Google's GKE is better than AKS, which is Azure, or EKS, which is Amazon. So remember, Amazon knows that Kubernetes allows a business to port their code to various cloud providers. So if you notice, they provide Kubernetes, but they don't necessarily really provide Kubernetes. They don't like it, you know. So they're pushing like Fargate and ECS. The other thing that I think Google does very well is they have like various tools that are designed to scale. So for example, you know, talking about like Firebase or BigQuery or their logging solution, which is all in, which is really good. I also think that they've done service mesh very well. So with Google, you can go in and I can say, I want service mesh on GKE, where if I want service mesh in EKS or AKS, I have to set it up manually, and it's more difficult. The other thing I really like with Google is that Apogee is a great API server that or gateway that Google provides. I haven't really seen an API gateway that's better than Apogee at this point. Google bought them 2 years ago. But those are some of the benefits of Google Cloud versus AWS and Azure. If I were to, and the other thing is kind of like artificial intelligence. So I don't know if people have Alexa versus Google Home. So Google Home only has a 2% error rate, when you talk to it. Alexa actually has 11 to 13% error rate, which is huge, a difference. And the reason why is Google's been doing like the voice stuff forever. So they've been doing text to speech to text for a very long time, and they have lots of APIs around it. And then I think that Google's ML AI stuff is unmatched. And that's not me being a Google fanboy or anything like that. I've been going to Google I/O for like 3 years, and I have never seen AWS have anything like that in reInvent. And I haven't really attended an Azure thing yet, but no one's talking about Azure ML AI.
Great. Okay, we'll skip this one. I think you kind of already answered that.
No worries.
You also spoke to the. So if I go to a client, not Marriott, a different client, and they're like, I need a DevSecOps engineer. Mm-hmm. What is your advice for handling that situation?
So really what they're asking for, so DevSecOps is actually one of the hottest areas right now. There might be an announcement coming soon about someone being a DevSecOps director or someplace. But like essentially, when you're looking for DevSecOps people, you're looking for someone who understands DevOps, and they might have like a security bent to them. So they're doing, most security engineers actually aren't doing automation. They're actually writing and crafting policy. And so a DevSecOps person will know how to write the policy, know how to do the automation, and then to really make them the unicorn is that they would have a couple professional certs, so that you can do white hat stuff, and that would make them a unicorn. So I would say DevSecOps is automation with writing the policy, security policy, and a lot of those people don't exist. It's a very hard skill to get.
Okay. Anyone have any more questions around that from the PRISM side?
I just have a question. Hi, it's Stacia. So what would be like an alternative to help advise a client if the client is still very adamant on finding this unicorn? Is there an alternative?
Then I would probably steer them towards like a DevOps person. Mm-hmm. Because if you have a release engineer who is actually doing a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, they're already doing the code quality. They've already set up like Twistlock or Black Duck or Aqua Security to do container scanning. They're already managing Fortify. So I think that the DevSecOps skill will begin to appear, mm-hmm. But right now I would poach from DevOps/release engineers to get that. I would say focus on that, and then the security stuff can kind of be an add-on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Dwayne. So very nice to meet you, and thank you again for doing this presentation. My question is to you. We do get requirements from time to time that may have a difficult requirement where they may want someone who they say DevOps engineer, and it may be more of a infrastructure versus app dev development, or they may want both. What is the likelihood of that coming into play as far as seeing that talent out there? Like, does that unicorn exist? And what would be the alternative to satisfy our customer requirements?
Sure. So I always say that you either want a developer who's done infrastructure or someone in infrastructure who's done development. And guess what? Not a lot of people have done it. That's why the salaries are so high. Right. So the issue, I think those skills will begin to merge over time. But even Google jokes that those people are unicorns. And so it's very difficult to get someone like that that's experienced. So I think more and more people are coming out of school with those skills. But like in terms of being able to think at an enterprise level, and has done development and has done infrastructure and vice versa, those skills just don't exist. If you think about it, the dev team has been separate from the operations team, and few people have migrated between the two silos.
Right. Thank you. Yep.
Dwayne, this is Kaushik. Thank you again for your time today. I have a question with regards to, I know we're talking a lot about folks that have already kind of been in the industry and have been in either development or operations side. However, if someone wanted to get into DevOps engineering, or even DevSecOps for that matter, and they're starting out in their career, maybe 2 or 3 years into a development role, how do they go? What would you tell them? What would they have to do to get into a DevOps role? I'm asking because a lot of our clients, and it's probably going to happen because there's a talent shortage right now for DevOps folks, but people who are interested in getting into the field, what would we tell those prospective candidates or employees to do to get into DevOps?
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting question. I would say, so start a release engineering practice and hand someone the keys to do Jenkins and all the different quality gates, and then slowly but surely over time give them the keys to the cloud. So the reason why I say focus on platform is because I'm going to take back what I said. I would say start a release engineering practice and have them focus on containers and platform. Because if your infrastructure team has already put together the platform, then all you're worried about is consumption of that platform. And so that is how you get someone to become a DevOps engineer. So get a developer, have them become a release engineer, and then focus on consumption of the platform. And then the next step to that is if you want DevSecOps, then you want to start to say, focus on the security of software. So security of software is kind of interesting. You can start with a wide net and then get smaller. I was talking to somebody about that. But for example, you start with the Artifactory and libraries and frameworks. I think most developers understand that. And then you talk about like unit tests, BDD, etc. And then afterwards, you then say, okay, our common artifact release to operations as a container. And so that means you're always scanning that, and that person gets skills in that. And then you want to start to do static code analysis, where you're beginning to look at code for vulnerabilities before it goes to production, and then use tools to do that. So I would say someone on the dev side, put them in release engineering, and then focus on consumption of the platform to focus on the operations side and not necessarily worry about all the stuff in between. And then begin to think about how to secure code from the libraries and frameworks that you consume all the way to the code that your teams actually make. Did that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have a question?
One more. Do you think serverless servers is going to become the predominant thing to create the automation without having the physicalities of the traditional servers over time?
Talking about serverless?
Yeah.
It's just a buzzword. So really serverless is just event driven programming. So in other words, an event occurs and then I execute a piece of code. That's really all it is. So I can, a lot of people, when they think of serverless, they think of there's no server, you're just executing something. It's just very small pieces of code, functions as a service, and an event occurs and I execute some code based on that event. And so I think it has its place, but it's not going to be the end all. You know, like you can do a lot with serverless, but it's not going to be the end all. It's the reason why you have REST versus gRPC. You know, you can have a mainframe versus x86. Each thing has its pluses and minuses, but you can't run a full business off of serverless.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're coming up close to an hour here. Dwayne, I wanted to ask you one final question, if we have time for it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't mean to put you on the spot here, but you know I like your LinkedIn About Me section where Dwayne says Elon Musk said there are 3 main skills required to thrive in today's economy. I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning when I was doing my intro for Dwayne, but he's worked in the financial services industry. He's had his own company, I believe. He's worked for internet startups. So these 3 skills, which he has skills in, are engineering, science, and economics. So wanted to ask you, again, you mentioned this is a scary time with everything that's going on. It's also exciting. It's also a time for innovation. When you think about the future of our world and the future of technologies, what kind of changes do you expect will emerge, like in conjunction with these skills and this disruptive time?
Sure. So I think we just got a sneak peek of the incoming AI apocalypse. My wife hates me talking about it all the time. But like, imagine if all these service workers all of a sudden don't have jobs, and there's 20 million people, you know, in our economy that essentially can't work. Now, of course, that's going to reverse, you know, once we figure out a vaccine and do testing and all that other stuff. But what is the world like when white collar workers, even like myself, or a doctor who's gone to school for, 12 years, all of a sudden is replaced by some logarithm? You know, attorneys are starting to fill this, developers are filling this too. And so what does that look like for government? What does that look like for society? What does that look like for fulfillment? You know, because a lot of people have fulfillment in terms of gaining things. And so that's a meaningful question that I think we all need to start thinking about, talking about. I think one of the interesting things is, families have kind of gotten closer. I also think that creativity will be a big thing in the future. The other thing to think about is imagine a world where, being the smartest person or joining a company doesn't necessarily determine your path in life. So for example, Xerox had 100,000 people to be $1 billion company, and WhatsApp only had 18 people. That's huge. You know, like before, a lot of people would share in the wealth, and now it's like a few people that share in wealth. Or think about like now we can begin to edit the genes of our babies. And so what does that mean what does that mean ethically when you can find out that your kid is not has average intelligence, but you can go ahead and ask your doctor to switch one gene and all of a sudden they become a genius? What does that mean? And if we think about like technology, us humans, we're going to start augmenting ourselves with technology more and more and more. And what does that look like? Do we start to become, machines? Like everyone's walking around with their smartphone, and no one can leave the house with their smartphone. But if you think about it, it has your calendar, it has your communication, all that stuff. The things that people used to do on their own, it is there. And then the things that really excite me right now, 2 technologies, really 3, but blockchain, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of lost focus, but on the back end, lots of financial companies or consortiums for healthcare are using it. AI and ML, really, that's starting to, displace some of our knowledge workers, which is how we make the money now in the economy. And then the last thing is quantum computing, where and it's not necessarily going to take over classical computing, because the computing is different, but quantum computing can jumpstart AI and machine learning, etc. So to me, I kind of think that if you look at all these scientific breakthroughs, and then you're able to transform those scientific breakthroughs by engineering some type of product, then think about, like, in the end, how does that affect the economy? Because if you, I went to this McKinsey discussion, and they were talking about that the size of the cyber economy, right, that doesn't involve human beings. This is just computers to computers talking to each other that don't involve anyone, is almost as like 50% as large as the economy that we work in now. And so, like, think about it, Zoom, it's just computers talking to computers, but they're generating revenue, or, the cloud. So this has profound impacts in terms of how we view ourselves as humans. And I think about that a lot. So I'm sorry if I...
Wow. No, thank you so much, Dwayne. This was really, I know I speak for all of us by saying we really enjoyed this and learned a lot. Seems like we could do this again sometime and go in a whole nother place with it. But thank you. I really, really, really appreciate it. And thank you everyone who joined. If you have more questions for Dwayne at any point, feel free to reach out to me. I'll chat with him, or he's on LinkedIn. You can find him there. And we wish you well, and thanks so much.
No worries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
have
you.
a good day,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.